The day I aged out of the system, I left with a black trash bag, $47, and a bruise on my wrist from where my last foster mother grabbed me to make sure I was really going. No one waved goodbye. No one said good luck. And no one told me that somewhere on the edge of a crumbling highway in eastern Montana, a dead man I had never met had left me the only thing he owned. If you've ever felt like the world handed everyone else a map and left you standing at a crossroads alone, subscribe. These stories are for you. My name is Delia Crane. I was born in Billings, placed in my first foster home at age 3, and moved 11 times before I was 17. The reasons were always different. Budget cuts, family reunifications that fell apart, a caseworker who lost my file, but the result was always the same. Another bedroom, another set of rules. Another family who would eventually stop pretending I was one of them. The last house was the Murphys. They weren't cruel, they were just done. When I turned 18 in March, Linda Murphy handed me a folder of documents the state required and told me there was a shelter in Billings that had a 30-day emergency slot for aging out youth. She said it like she was reading off a grocery list. I stood in the driveway for a long time after their car backed out. I hadn't cried. I don't think I had the energy. I just looked at the folder in my hands and thought, this is the whole of you, Delia. A folder, a number, a closed case. The shelter in Billings was full. I slept in my car, a 2003 Honda Civic I had bought for $800 with 3 summers of dishwashing money, for 11 nights. I'd park behind a Walmart, lock the doors, and try not to think about winter coming. October in Montana isn't kind. I picked up shifts at a diner. I ate one real meal a day and kept the rest of my money sealed in an envelope in my glove box because I didn't trust myself not to spend it if I could see it. I was trying to scrape enough together for a deposit on a room somewhere, anywhere. And then, on a Tuesday morning in early November, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. This message is for Delia Ann Crane. My name is Gerald Foss. I'm an attorney in Harlow, Montana. I have a matter of some legal importance to discuss with you regarding the estate of one Raymond Earl Crane. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I sat in my car in the Walmart parking lot and listened to that message 3 times. Raymond Earl Crane. I had never heard that name in my life. Gerald Foss's office was above a hardware store in a town, so small I almost drove through it without stopping. He was a tall man in his 70s, thin as wire, with reading glasses that sat permanently halfway down his nose. He shook my hand like he meant it, which I noticed because most people don't. Raymond Crane was your grandfather, he said, sitting down behind a desk stacked with manila folders. Your mother's father. He passed 6 weeks ago. Cardiac arrest. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't known my mother, not really. She'd surrendered me voluntarily at age 3, a name in a document, a signature I'd stared at for years trying to decide if I hated her. He knew about you, Foss said, as if he could read the question forming in my face. He tried to find you twice. The state wouldn't release information. He hired a private search firm in 2019. They found your general location but not a current address. He paused. He was sorry he couldn't reach you sooner. Sorry. I held that word in my mouth and didn't know what to do with it. What did he leave me? I asked. Foss folded his hands on the desk. The Saddleback Motel. 14 units, 2 acres of land, a storage shed, and whatever contents remain on the property. He slid a photograph across the desk. I picked it up. It was a long, single-story building, painted the color of old mustard, sitting alongside a 2-lane highway with nothing but flat land on either side. Half the unit doors were hanging crooked. The sign, the Saddleback, was missing 2 letters. The parking lot was cracked asphalt overgrown with yellowed weeds. It's been closed for 11 years, Foss said quietly. There are back taxes owed, roughly $9,000. You have 60 days from the date of transfer to either pay or the county can seize it. He looked at me over his glasses. I want to be honest with you, Delia. Most people in your position would walk away, the liability alone. How do I get there? I asked. The Saddleback was worse in person. The roof over units 4 through 7 had partially collapsed inward, leaving a jagged mouth of rotted timber and curled shingles. Weeds had grown through the concrete walkway that ran the length of the building, cracking it into puzzle pieces. The office window was boarded up with plywood so old it had turned gray and soft. When I pushed on it, it exhaled a smell of mold and something dead. I had nowhere else to go. I moved into Unit 1, the one that still had an intact ceiling and a door that mostly closed, and I lived there. I swept 11 years of dust into corners. I found a sleeping bag at a thrift store in Harlow for $6 and put it on top of the bare mattress frame. I ran an extension cord from the one working outdoor outlet to a space heater I'd borrowed from the diner. November was getting colder by the day. My mornings started at 4:30 when the cold woke me up before the heater could fight it back. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to the silence, which wasn't really silence. The building made sounds, groaning in the wind, the intermittent tap of something loose on the roof. An occasional sound from the far end of the building, Unit 9, that I told myself was an animal, a bird maybe, something that had found a way inside. I kept my phone charged. I called the county about the taxes. I talked to a woman at a small business assistant's office who was genuinely kind, but ultimately told me my options were limited without capital or credit history. I ate gas station food and leftovers from the diner and tried to do the math every night on a notepad. $9,000. I made $11 an hour. The math wasn't working. During the days when the light was good, I walked the property. I opened every unit I could get into. Most were empty. A few had abandoned furniture, a chair here, a broken television there. Unit 6 had a wall covered in hand-drawn maps of Montana hiking trails, which stopped me cold for a long moment. Someone had cared about something here once, but Unit 9 stayed locked. The door was a solid wood slab with a deadbolt that looked newer than everything around it. There was no key on the ring Foss had given me. When I pressed my ear to the door, the sound, soft, almost like a low hum, was more distinct. Not an animal, not the wind, something mechanical. I told myself I'd deal with it later. I didn't deal with it later. 2 weeks in, I was cleaning out the motel office when I found the ledger. It was underneath the front desk, wedged between the wall and the counter frame, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. A standard composition notebook, black and white cover, the kind you buy at any drugstore. My grandfather's name was written on the inside cover in careful block letters. Raymonde Crane, private. I sat on the dusty floor and read it. Most of it was what you'd expect. Room bookings, expenses, repair notes. A record of the slow, grinding decline of a small business over many years. But near the back of the ledger the tone changed. The entries became shorter, more cryptic. November 14, moved the remainder into N9. Safe secured, December 2, paid Harmon in cash, no record. January 9, if something happens to me, Delia needs to know about N9, need to find her first. March 22, Foss has her last known details, trying again. August 7, found out she aged out. God forgive me for not being faster. I read those last lines 4 times. N9, Unit 9, and then safe secured. My hands weren't quite steady when I put the ledger down. I spent 2 days trying to find a key that fit the deadbolt on Unit 9. I went through every drawer in the office, every shelf in the storage shed, every coat pocket of the jackets left hanging in the units that still had closets. Nothing. On the 3rd day, I went back to Foss. He seemed unsurprised to see me. Unit 9, I said. He looked at me for a long moment, then reached into the center drawer of his desk and produced a small brass key on a simple ring. "He gave me this 3 years ago," Foss said. "Told me to give it to you, and only after you'd spent at least 2 weeks on the property." He set it on the desk between us. His words were, "She needs to understand what she's walking into before she walks into it." I stared at the key. "What's in there, Mr. Foss?" He shook his head slowly. "I honestly don't know the details. He told me it was important. He told me it was for you. And he told me," he paused, choosing his words, "that there were people who might come looking for it. That you should be careful who you told." The drive back to the Saddleback felt longer than usual. The sky was doing that thing Montana skies do in November, turning the color of old pewter right before dark. I held the brass key in my palm the whole way and felt the weight of it, which was almost nothing. Almost. If you've ever been the person they counted out, the one nobody came back for, the one handed the worst of what was left and told to be grateful, subscribe. Because these stories exist for exactly that person. And that person deserves to see what happens when someone finally opens the right door. I opened Unit 9 just after sundown that evening. The brass key slid in like it had been waiting for me. The room smelled of cool, dry air, wrong for an abandoned motel room, like something had been climate-controlled in there. My phone flashlight swept across the space, and I stopped in the doorway. The room had been stripped completely. No bed frame, no furniture, just bare walls, bare floor, and along the back wall, shelving units bolted into the studs. The shelves held neatly stacked plastic totes, all sealed and labeled in my grandfather's careful handwriting. Financial, legal, correspondence, history. And in the center of the room, on the floor, sat a fireproof safe. Gray steel, digital panel, the size of a small suitcase. But what made me go completely still was the noise. A small white unit hummed in the corner, a dehumidifier, plugged into an outlet, running quietly, keeping the air dry. Someone had run electrical to this room specifically to protect whatever was inside it. Someone had planned this for years. I walked to the shelves first. The tote labeled legal held documents in plastic sleeves, property deeds. The Saddleback, yes, but also 3 other parcels of land, 2 in Montana, 1 in Wyoming. I didn't understand what I was looking at. I flipped through the deeds with trembling fingers. All 4 properties were titled to Delia Crane, my name, on documents dated 2021. He'd transferred them to me legally, officially, 2 years before he died. Before Foss had even confirmed he'd found me. He had believed he would find me. I sat down on the floor of Unit 9 and tried to breathe. That's when I heard tires on the gravel outside. I turned my phone flashlight off. I sat in the dark of Unit 9 and listened. One vehicle. It killed its engine. A door opened and closed quietly, the kind of quiet that means intentional. Footsteps on cracked asphalt, slow and deliberate, moving along the front of the building. I'd left the door to Unit 9 slightly ajar. Through the gap I could see the walkway and a beam of light. Someone with a flashlight, moving unit to unit, trying handles. My heart was behind my ribs like a fist. The footsteps stopped outside Unit 9. A knock, hard, 3 times. Delia Crane, a man's voice, flat and professional. "My name is Curtis Bale. I'm an attorney. I represent the interests of a party who has a prior claim on property located at this address. I need to speak with you." I said nothing. "I know you're in there. Your car is outside. I'm not here to harm you, but we need to talk about what Raymond Crane left behind, because some of it was not his to give." I didn't open the door that night. I stayed in Unit 9 with my back against the safe until I heard his car pull away an hour later. Then I sat in the dark for another hour after that, not trusting the silence. In the morning I called Foss and told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment. "Curtis Bale," he said finally. "I know that name. He represents a man named Harmon Price, local developer. Bought up several parcels in this county over the past decade. Another pause. Your grandfather sold Price 2 acres adjacent to the Saddleback in 2009, but Price always wanted the motel land too. Raymond refused every offer. Foss, I said slowly, what's on the motel land that Price would want so badly? A long pause. That, he said, is a very good question. I opened the safe the next morning. There was no combination written anywhere. I stared at the keypad for a long time. Then I thought about what Foss had said about my grandfather, that he'd tried twice to find me, that he'd known I aged out of foster care, that he felt guilty. The date I aged out was March 15th. I typed 3:15, the light blinked red. I thought again, the ledger, the entry that mentioned me by name, August 7, found out she aged out. I typed 8:07, the light turned green. The bolts retracted with a deep, solid sound. Inside the safe, 3 items. The first was a manila envelope marked Survey Environmental. The second was a USB drive labeled PRYCE/correspondence. The third was a letter, handwritten, my name on the outside. I opened the letter last, but I'll tell you what it said first, because it changed everything I thought I knew. Delia. If you're reading this, Foss found you and you found your way to the Saddleback. I'm proud of you already for getting this far. I need to tell you something that will make you angry. I'm going to ask you to forgive me anyway. In 2011, a county environmental survey found something beneath the Saddleback property, a natural spring, deep, clean, and significant. In this part of Montana, water rights are worth more than gold. Harmon Price found out through a county clerk he had in his pocket. He's been trying to acquire this land ever since, using every legal and semi-legal method available to him. I fought him for years. I'm leaving you the tools to finish that fight. The survey is in the envelope. The USB drive contains every correspondence between Price and people on his payroll, including 2 county officials. I've been collecting it for a decade with help from a water rights attorney in Billings named Margaret Odell. Call Margaret. She's been waiting. The Saddleback isn't a failed motel, Delia. It sits above a water source worth millions in water rights alone. I couldn't save your mother. I couldn't find you in time to give you any kind of childhood, but I could save this. And I could save it for you. The water was always there. I just needed you to find it. I'm sorry it took so long. I love you. Grandpa Ray, I don't know how long I sat on the floor of Unit 9. Long enough for the dehumidifier to feel loud. Long enough for the light through the cracked window to shift from morning gray to something almost warm. I held that letter and I felt something I was not prepared for. Not relief, not triumph. Grief. Pure, undiluted grief for a man I'd never met. For a grandfather who had spent years searching for me, while I was 11 miles away sleeping in somebody else's spare room, learning not to want things. For a mother who had given me up and never explained why. For all the years between what could have been and what was. I pressed the letter to my chest and I cried. Hard. The kind of crying that sounds ugly and doesn't care. Because here is what I understood in that moment. Sitting in a dusty room in a broken motel in eastern Montana. He had loved me before he knew me. He had built something for me before he could find me. And I had been out there alone this whole time, not knowing there was someone trying. When the crying stopped, I sat up. I looked at the envelope, the USB drive, the letter. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made a plan. But before that plan could breathe, Curtis Bale came back. This time with a document. He slid it under the door of Unit 1 while I was sleeping. A legal notice claiming that Raymond Crane had verbally agreed to sell the Saddleback to Harmon Price in 2010, and that the subsequent transfer of the deed to Delia Crane constituted fraudulent conveyance. It was designed to scare me. It worked. For about 6 hours, I drove to Billings. I walked into the office of Margaret Odell, Water Rights and Property Law. She was a small woman in her late 50s with silver hair and eyes like a hawk, and the moment I said Raymond Crane's name, she stood up from her desk. "I've been waiting for this call," she said, "for 3 years. What followed was not fast. Nothing real ever is. It took 4 months. 4 months of legal filings and county hearings, and one very tense afternoon in a Billings courthouse where Harmon Price sat across the room from me in a suit that cost more than my car and looked at me like I was an inconvenience he intended to brush away. The USB drive was the thing that broke it open. The correspondence between Price and the county clerk, a man named Dale Sutton, showed a decade of coordination to suppress the environmental survey, delay any competing land surveys, and pressure Raymond Crane through selective code enforcement violations. My grandfather had been cited for 11 different property violations in the last 3 years of his life. Every single one had been fabricated or grossly exaggerated. They had been trying to bleed him out slowly. They had underestimated how long Raymond Crane could hold on, and they had never once considered that he might have been collecting everything. Sutton resigned from the county the week the USB contents were presented. Price's fraudulent conveyance claim was dismissed with prejudice. The water rights were affirmed as part of the Saddleback property. Margaret Odell shook my hand on the courthouse steps in the cold February air. "You own a water source, Delia," she said. "A significant one. There are agricultural operations in this county that will pay serious money to lease those rights. And there's federal rural development funding available for the property itself." She handed me a folder. "Your grandfather started the application in 2022. I finished it last month. Pending your signature, you have a grant for property rehabilitation, enough to repair the roof, restore 4 units, and bring the building up to code." I looked at the folder. I looked back at the Saddleback, which I could not see from the courthouse steps but could feel behind me, the way you feel something that has become part of your geography. "He planned all of this," I said. "He planned all of this," she confirmed. "It's May now. The crew started on the roof last week. Unit 9 is the cleanest room on the property. I've kept the shelves, kept the safe empty now but still there, and I've added one thing of my own. A photograph taped to the wall beside the door. It's the only photo I have of Raymond Earl Crane. Foss gave it to me. A man in his 60s, standing in front of the Saddleback when it was still open, when the sign had all its letters and the parking lot was freshly sealed. He's squinting in the sun. He's smiling. He looks like someone who believed things would work out. I live in Unit 1 still, though it's warmer now. I've painted the walls. I put a real bed in. I have 2 part-time employees starting in June to help with the renovation, and the first water rights lease agreement goes into effect in July. I am not rich. I am not finished. But I am standing on land that belongs to me, land that was saved for me, land that someone spent years holding onto because he had faith in a girl he'd never met, who had his blood, who he believed would find her way there eventually. I walk the property every morning, past the cracked walkway that we haven't gotten to yet, past the old sign which still has 2 letters missing, past Unit 9. Every morning I stop there for a moment, and I think about what it means to be loved by someone before they ever knew you, to be prepared for, to be believed in. I spent 18 years inside a system that saw me as a case number. My grandfather saw me as an inheritance, not someone to leave things to, someone worth leaving things for. There is a difference. And if you've ever been the person in the room that everyone looked past, the one they handed the impossible task and the emptied-out resources and the back taxes and the broken roof, I want you to know something. Sometimes the thing that looks like nothing is the thing someone loved enough to protect. Sometimes the door everyone walked past is the one with your name on it. You just have to live long enough to find the key. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been counted out and kept going anyway, subscribe. There are more stories like this one, and every single one of them is for you.